king of the band's winner, Thierry Lockhart. I am urging you to practice social distancing to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Avoid large gatherings, and if you have to stand in a line, make sure you are 3 feet apart from the other person. Get vaccinated today, protect yourself, and be responsible.
And I urge you, get vaccinated. It is safe and it is effective. Stop the spread, help the fight, and make the choice that is right. And let us unite and do the thing right. Man and woman, let us join in the fight.
On Friday, July 23rd, there'll be thousands of dollars to be won. A lotto jackpot of $68,000. A new home, car, or that college education.
Lotto, you have to be in it to win it.
Next lotto jackpot, $68,000.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way, Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
The Super 6 jackpot for Friday, July 23rd is $210,000. Super 6, more jackpot money.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way, Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
This evening on the VC3 News Update, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Simone Keyser-Beach has highlighted that there is no evidence of any COVID-19 variants in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Efforts to engage taxi drivers as it relates to vaccines and the COVID-19 protocols are ongoing. And the Organization of American States and the European Union make donation to the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force. Join us at 7 p.m. this evening for these stories and more on the VC3 News Updates.
And welcome to this week's edition of Roundtable Talk. As the debate and the war we continue to rage on COVID-19 continues, it's never too often not to engage in the debate and continue the dialogue. This evening, to do that, we have, as usual, Dr. JERROL Thompson, who is an advisor to the SVG COVID Task Force, and he's also an infectious diseases specialist. And we are also pleased to welcome Trinidad-based Vincentian surgeon, Dr. Malcolm Samuel. Gentlemen, welcome to this evening's edition of Roundtable. So happy to have you both.
Certainly a pleasure. And Malcolm, really, it's my pleasure seeing you again. Yeah.
Yes, well, I'm not seeing anybody, so I'm talking to myself, but I'm glad to be home after a year and a half, and glad to be making a contribution to the debate.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Dr. Thompson to start by giving us an update, a status update as to what is happening here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and then after that, Malcolm, you'll tell us about your experience in Trinidad.
Yes. You know, I think there are some core data that everybody is aware of. We have just over 2,200 plus cases, of which there's less than 100 that is active. We have almost 2,000 that can be said to be recovered, but we now know that when we say recovered, we don't always mean completely recovered. There are some persons who are still experiencing this issue of long COVID. We have close to about 25,000 doses of vaccine that have been given, some which has been the first dose, some are fully immunized with the second dose. And this is constantly changing. Whatever figure you give today, it will change tomorrow. But the great thing is that we've gotten a large supply of Sputnik vaccine in. A number of people, the unions and so forth, have been calling that they would like the Sputnik. Some people have also said they would like to see the Cuban vaccine, the Abdullah here. It's expected we would also receive the Pfizer vaccine at some point in time that has been handed from the US Biden administration to CARICOM, and that will be distributed in due times, and an announcement I'm sure will be made on this issue. But the Sputnik is here, and along with the AstraZeneca that we've always had, we have been stepping up the vaccination program, and it's expected that we've seen some uptick in the vaccination. And I think that a major rollout program of promotion and talking to people and having doctors who seem to have, like Dr. Grant, some influence. Dr. Samuel, sorry, some influence.
JERROL.
And sorry, but yes.
You've forgotten my name. You haven't seen me in so long, eh?
Oh gosh, man, how could I do that? How could I do that? And basically, I think this would go a long way, along with the other influencers. And I have called for a program where each person who is vaccinated, please talk to 2 persons who are not vaccinated. So as one person, talk to 2 and try and convince them. And we're going to be trying to provide people with a lot more information of how to overcome a lot of the hesitancy people may have and the questions that people have been asking. We have answers to those questions. We just have to get those answers out to people so that they're fully satisfied and they'll make the step of taking the vaccine.
Vaccine hesitancy vis-a-vis vaccine refusal, is there a difference? How do we differentiate between both?
Yes, we say that there are 3 states. There's the vaccine demand. People who will rush, I want to get this vaccine. There are anti-vaxxers, and there's a whole range of vaccine hesitancy for various reasons in the middle. Most of these persons will, and probably in due course, will shift towards becoming vaccinated. They've seen what is going on around them. We've seen, and we'll hear a little bit more about what's been happening in Trinidad in terms of the surge they've had in cases, the fact that the Delta virus is in Barbados, and what is taking place in the BVI. Up until this morning, 23 persons had died. In a matter of 3 weeks, 2,200 cases, when they were really under 300 cases just 3 weeks ago. And this can tell you, and they suspect that it's the Delta virus there. And so we basically say, when your neighbor's house is on fire, you wet yours. And we have to take those steps. Now, some people in the BVI, lines, the queues are there now. Those people who were hesitant, I'm answering your question, who were hesitant before, are now rushing to be vaccinated. 800 persons were vaccinated just on last weekend. You understand? The last weekend, 800 persons vaccinated in 2 days. And so we hope that they have all the supply of vaccine they need. And I'm pretty sure that they will get the assistance because they are also a dependency of the United Kingdom. Yeah. But the part of the OECS, and I'm sure that all assistance will be given in whatever way. But the range of hesitancy are for various reasons. Whether people think the vaccine was too quick, or whether people are just scared from all of the things they've been hearing about. And I think that it's clear now, coming out of what's been happening in the United States, that there are shadow groups that are actually being paid, being recruited to push and promote this sort of activity. Just a week or so ago, an ExxonMobil executive was caught on camera by Greenpeace saying that they employ shadow groups to try and promote climate denial when the company is trying to say, yes, we are now for climate change and global warming is true. They are paying shadow groups not to do it. And the same thing is happening with the anti-vaccine movement. I'm making the point there are a lot of people who would like this pandemic to be prolonged. There are a lot of reasons why some people may want to see a pandemic prolonged or for various reasons, and they are using various means. Plus, the anti-vax movement itself has been around for a long time, and they've been pouring out a ton load of videos. I mean, how could somebody have a magnet attached to your arm and say that, well, don't take it because all these things are fake proposals, and sadly, they have worked with some person. So in getting the message out, that group of hesitants will probably shrink. But sadly, it sometimes may take that you have to start seeing death before, like in the BVI, before people start to run in order to get vaccinated. I hope we don't really reach that stage.
Very troubling. Dr. Samuel, your take?
Yes, Teresa. Well, what I would say is that obviously Trinidad has had a really big surge earlier on this year. And now it's actually, the rate is actually slowly but surely going down. There is obviously the anti-vaxxers down there and the vaccine hesitancy, but to be perfectly honest, my perception of what is happening is that I think there's going to be quite a large take-up of the vaccine in Trinidad within the general population. I think people have seen deaths are now 1,003 today, including today's new figures. 3 additional deaths today, 272 tested positive over for the last 3 days, because normally their positivity rate includes swabs that have been done over a 3 to 4 day range. And many people are seeing someone they know who has died, or someone distant relative. So I think there is an appreciation and an understanding of, hey guys, we really need to do this. We need to do this to open the economy. We need to get things back on track so we can resume a normal, or as normal as possible. Because Trinidad has been locked down. The borders have only reopened since Saturday. And generally things are slowly getting back. So in order to avoid any going back, they are going to vaccinate. Trinidad just received last week 800,000 doses of the Sinopharm WHO approved vaccine. So they are now doing mass vaccinations. Different sectors are being vaccinated. So the business sector, industry, the food sector, supermarkets, construction workers were vaccinated some weeks ago. So construction is now reopened. Supermarkets, their association has brought all their workers together. All the food industry services, food industry workers are being vaccinated. And then there are 2 drive-in vaccination sites which have been opened. And all 103 health centers and clinics throughout the country are offering the vaccines to the general public. And there has been take-up. So I looked at some figures today also about the percentage of vaccine take-up in different countries in the Caribbean. And Trinidad is at 17.1%. St. Vincent is at 13.65%. I think this was up to yesterday's figures. So I will tell you, based on what I'm seeing, that Trinidad is going to reach 30, 40, 50% in another month, because people are taking the vaccine.
Okay, and there's a question from someone saying they're under the impression that there's a move worldwide to vaccinate at least 70% of the world population. Is this true?
Yes, because Malcolm, you want to go?
Yeah, well, I think the 70% figure has come in by the so-called herd immunity. Essentially, what that means is that if you have a certain percentage of the population vaccinated, then even if the other percentage or the remainder are not, if the virus circulates within that population, then it's going to die out eventually, because what will happen is that with the vaccinated people and those who get the disease, then eventually immunity will go to 100%, because unfortunately we're not going to get everybody in the world to take the vaccine, and there are segments of the population who may not take it, like children, for example. We are not going to probably get the authorized and the recommended vaccines for children here for quite a while. So our young people will probably not be vaccinated for a while. So the 70% is just a figure which epidemiologists and persons like JERROL, who are infectious disease specialists, have said that if you have that percentage, then we can live with it. Because at the end of the day, this is not going to go away. We're not going to get rid of it. We just have to learn to live, deal, and control it as best as we can.
I know you want to jump in on this, but we'll take our first break,
Sure, okay.
and you'll pick up from that when we come back after the break.
This evening on the VC3 News Update, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Simone Keezer-Beach has highlighted that there is no evidence of any COVID-19 variants in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Efforts to engage taxi drivers as it relates to vaccines and the COVID-19 protocols are ongoing. And the Organization of American States and the European Union make donation to the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force. Join us at 7 p.m. this evening for these stories and more on the VC3 News Updates.
Just before we took the break, Dr.
Yes.
Thompson, you were about
Yes.
to make a point.
This thing about 70%, I don't want a person to think it is arbitrary. Each virus, especially the contagious viruses, has what we call an R number, the R0. It's called the reproduction number. Measles has a reproduction number of 15. It's the most contagious virus that we know. Therefore, with vaccines, you need 95% vaccination rate. With the flu, the R0 is usually about 0.9 or 1. So therefore, you only need to vaccinate maybe the elderly, the immunocompromised. Not everybody needs to be immunized with a flu vaccine. But with the COVID, the R0 has been 2.6, almost 3. And when we do the calculation, it's a complex formula we use, and you do the formula, and it comes up between 65 and 70% of people must be vaccinated to do, as Malcolm has said, to prevent the virus from walking stick and spreading through everybody. So that if you're vaccinated and other people are vaccinated near me, if I am positive, you are the barrier to someone else behind you getting the virus. They're protected because you are vaccinated. The spread of the virus, the contagiousness of it can't reach them because they have to jump on you first and then you spread it to someone else. And because you're already vaccinated, you are helping to prevent transmission. That's why we say these vaccines have turned out to be over 90%, some 93, now 94, 95% effective. And they may not be 100%. But people are taking it, Teresa, that if it's not 100%, it's zero. If it's not 100%, it's zero. When it's 90 something percent. And also with transmission, just by being vaccinated after the second dose, again, transmission is reduced by 90%. So it's working. The vaccines around the world is working. That's why you're hearing that 99% of the people who are coming down with the COVID-19 are the unvaccinated persons. Now, what is 99%, 97%? It means that 1%, 2%, 3% of people who are vaccinated might still get sick. That's true. A breakthrough infection. But usually, if they do get a breakthrough infection, it's usually just a runny nose, a little sneezing, a headache, or a little sore throat. That's it. So if you get or I get infected, that's all we might well have. Whereas the unvaccinated person could end up with death or with... Imagine in the BVI, over 100 people are hospitalized. How many beds are there in a hospital? You could tell that ICUs are going to be overwhelmed and the healthcare system is going to be put into jeopardy if we have. And I'm really glad that we don't have any of the variants here. I think the CMO has been saying that. But it may well come. And when it does come, because we have one of the lowest vaccination rates in the OECS, the lowest, one of the lowest.
We could become an
Yes.
We could be in very serious trouble.
Yeah, Gerald, you actually, again, I'm looking at the figures I quoted earlier, and St. Vincent is at the bottom of the OACS. The two countries below us are Jamaica at 6% and Haiti at 0%. The BVI, funny enough, is at 45%. So, you know, it shows you how active the Delta is, because I think they are having problems with Delta, if I'm not, if I'm correct. In the BVI, I mean.
Yeah.
Okay, a recent poll indicated that the unvaccinated are saying that COVID is better. Getting COVID is much better than being vaccinated, than the vaccine itself. What do you say to these people?
Yes, this is a common question, that getting the virus naturally is better than getting the vaccine. It has never been the case. They used to say that about measles again. But with measles, do you know about 1 in 100 kids get pneumonia, measles pneumonia? 1 in 1,000 get encephalitis and they get brain dead. And people used to carry their kids to measles parties to get it naturally rather than be vaccinated. And they would find their kids becoming with encephalitis. Same thing. The amount of people, this thing that 99% of people recover is false, because a certain amount of people die. We've seen that in the BVI, and 23 deaths. And we are also seeing the amount of hospitalizations. And we're then seeing long COVID. Long COVID. So if you think it's better to rub up and get the virus and feel, well, you have it, first of all, the immunity from getting it naturally doesn't last long, no longer than a few months. It starts to wane. And secondly, if you get the virus, we don't know if it's going to kill you, or we don't know if it is going to put you in a hospital and damage your lungs and your kidneys and all that kind of stuff. And we don't know whether you are going to really come out of that hospital the same type of person that you went in.
I want to talk a little bit more about long COVID. Have you seen any cases locally? And I'd ask Malcolm the same thing as well, if he has seen any in Trinidad.
Yeah, yes, Trinidad has reported a number of long COVID cases, a number of long COVID individuals. It's a small figure. I don't know the figure off the top of my head. The other thing that Trinidad has reported, which I'm not sure if it has happened here, is the MIS-C, which is the multiple inflammatory syndrome in children. So Trinidad, obviously I am based at Eric Williams, which is where the pediatric hospital is. And some of my colleagues there have had and diagnosed a number of young persons with MIS-C, MIS-C, which is the multiple inflammatory syndrome in children associated with COVID.
Yes, I want to agree that we're now seeing, as we went through and vaccinated older people, then we vaccinated the diabetics who are older as well, the 60s. And we came down the line. We encouraged a lot of the elderly to become vaccinated, and they did. Now we're seeing in some countries of the world, it's younger persons. Here in St. Vincent, the last time I came on, we were showing that 27% of the people who were catching COVID here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines was in a younger age group. Remember that, Teresa? Mm-hmm. And we've seen that throughout the world. Sadly, too, we are seeing that in many countries like the United States, where people of color, black people, in England, in certain parts of the world, they seem to have had a higher level of hesitancy than even the whites. On the Republican Party in the United States, I don't want to get involved in politics, they've been, many of their announcers on Fox, Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity and so forth, have been pushing people should not vaccinate. They've all now come around and changed their tune, telling people you must get vaccinated. But guess what? They were all vaccinated too. And you're seeing senators who are ultra-right coming and becoming vaccinated. And messages were being sent to the black communities, don't vaccinate. Remember Tuskegee, there's a plot out for you. And our communities have been hit very hard, and I'm sad it's been shifting over to the Caribbean as well. So the adult population, as well as younger population, and certainly in children, we are seeing, that hyperinflammatory syndrome, as well as children are not as severely affected, but children will carry more of the virus in their nostrils than adults at times. Mm-hmm. But they may not suffer as severe infections other than the MIS-C, hyperinflammatory syndrome that Dr. Samuel has talked about.
Okay. And this MIS-C, how long is that likely to last in children?
It can last, it's a serious condition. It's not that common, but it's a serious condition. We haven't seen any cases here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I hope we don't, but it's well recognized around the world, and we're always going to constantly monitor for it, especially as our kids start going back. They're doing exams now, but as the plan going back to school and so forth, this is something we have to really watch for.
Okay, I'm going to ask both of you, how do you think vaccine politics is affecting the intake of vaccines in our various destinations?
Malcolm, you got that?
Well, when you say vaccine politics, Teresa, what?
There's a lot of politics with regards to the vaccine.
Okay, well, what I can speak to is the Trinidad approach. Now, Trinidad made the decision that they are not going to use any non-WHO authorized vaccines. And that was simply because Trinidad doesn't really have an organization like the CDC or the FDA, where you have scientists who can, wade through all of these studies and come to. So they use the WHO as a surrogate. And also, it also allows for an indemnification process, or process is not the word, but if the government uses such a vaccine, then the WHO and which is the World Authority on Health, basically, would sort of act as an indemnification in case of any untoward effects, because they have researched it, they have reviewed all of these studies, they have done all these super analysis, they have visited the factories and looked at all of that. So they are saying, yes, this is good to go. These are the cautions that you need to take, the precautions, whatever, but we think it's good to go. So therefore, that means that Trinidad has only used AstraZeneca and Sinopharm. Sinopharm is from the Beijing Institute of Sciences. They are going to be getting some Pfizer from the US as part of the whole tranche of vaccines that the president is sending out to the Caribbean. And they have also had an order in for Johnson & Johnson through the African Medical Platform, which the government says is going to come sometime in August or September, which, as you know, is a one jab. So that's why they haven't used any other vaccine. They haven't used Sputnik or the Sinovac or any of the other ones that are in use in other countries. And that's their approach. They have been criticized for it by the opposition, but I think it's a sensible approach because you want to cover all your bases and you want to ensure that you get the best for your country. I know there was a little flare up between Guyana and Trinidad some weeks or a month or two ago when the Prime Minister at one of his Saturday meetings said something similar to what I just said, and Guyana took offense because Guyana had been getting Sputnik. Now, as we know, Sputnik is not WHO authorized at present. So they seem to think that Dr. Rowley was telling them, you know, guys, you shouldn't be doing that. But he never suggested any such thing. He just said what Trinidad is doing. And so as far as the politics are concerned, I think it's a storm in a teacup, to be perfectly honest. I think, you know, politicians like to argue a little too much over silly things and nonsense.
Okay, and I know you want to comment on that, but it's time for a break, and when we come back, we'll talk some about that and the different types of vaccines being used around the region. Back in just a moment.
Band of the Year winner 2019. I'm urging you to practice proper hand washing to curb the spread of COVID-19. When you're able to wash your hands, use soap and water to clean your hands thoroughly. Get vaccinated today. Protect yourself and be responsible.
Listen to me and I urge you, get vaccinated. It is safe and it is effective. Stop the spread, help the fight, and make the choice that is right. And let us unite and do the thing right. Man and woman, let us join in the fight.
On Friday, July 23rd, there'll be thousands of dollars to be won. A lotto jackpot of $68,000. A new home, car, or that college education.
Lotto, you have to be in it to win it.
Next lotto jackpot, $68,000.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
The Super 6 jackpot for Friday, July 23rd is $210,000. Super 6, more jackpot money.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
Welcome back. We were talking about the politics of vaccines, and I know you wanted to come in here.
There's no doubt that there has been what's called vaccine apartheid. The countries that received and started high levels of vaccination were in the north, the European countries, United States and Canada. Whereas, do you know there are some countries in Africa that have not as yet started a full-fledged vaccination program? And this is where the disparity lies. Now, there's no doubt that some of the newer vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, are excellent vaccines. But their manufacturing rate, it may take 5-6 years to actually vaccinate and spread those vaccines around the world when you start looking at vaccination rates. Now, there are different parts of the world. China has 4 vaccines. Sinopharm is one of them. And they basically are also supplying Vietnam, Cambodia, all those countries, even Australia. And then Russia has vaccines and is supplying Argentina, Chile, Peru, different countries, Venezuela, and so forth with the Sputnik. And the present effort by Joe Biden to give 600 million vaccines is good. That will vaccinate 300 million people, but the world has 8 billion people. So how do you vaccinate people in time? We also have to rely on these things. Where it is true that the Sputnik has not gotten that approval yet, because some of these processes sometimes take a long time and so forth. I believe that the Sputnik vaccine is one of the better vaccines around. And since its publication in the Lancet and its profile, its studies had shown 92% efficacy in the real world. It hasn't shown much in the way of other side effects. I think that is a good vaccine. That's why many people in St. Vincent, the unions, the teachers' union said, if the Prime Minister took Sputnik, we will take Sputniks. We want Sputnik too. So I think that the availability of Sputnik, we are not just resting on whether the world offers its approval and gives you indemnification. Everybody in St. Vincent has what we call double indemnification. You're not only indemnified by the World Health Organization, you're also indemnified by the government. So we have an adverse reaction committee. I happen to be on that committee. And if there are any reports of adverse reactions, we would go around and investigate to see if it is really an adverse reaction. I mean, outside of redness in the arm and a little fever, a little headache for 24 hours, we don't really see. But when it comes to politics, I believe, I look at things from the standpoint of the way people use information that comes from government in the way they want to use it. Recently, there was someone, a notable lawyer, who was saying that in Trinidad, 341 persons had died from receiving the vaccine. When everything was finally revealed, what had taken place is that they were showing a video of this very well-respected doctor in Trinidad, Dr. Trotman. And they had clipped that video. And they had put writing on the video, and the writing was derogatory, saying, look at her stammering. Look how she's so nervous. And I've seen this lady repeatedly. She's a tower of strength. And they were saying she was stammering. And I was so disappointed with that. But when you look at the charts, and Dr. Samuel has said there's now 1,003 persons who are dead. At the time, there was 800 and something persons who had died. As part of the wave in Trinidad, 358 had died between May the 1st and June the 1st, with 9 persons dying on May the 30th, the highest death day in Trinidad. And then 341 persons had died from June the 8th to July the 8th. And she was expressing her condolences to these persons, as anybody who's in authority and somebody who cares would do. But that person, that lawyer, based on this video that they had received, went and attacked, and I think it was awful, it was shameful what that person did. And they were saying that instead of these persons dying of the virus, the person died from receiving the vaccine. And it would have taken various other clips from the epidemiologists and the Minister of Health and the CMO to say that a certain amount of persons would have, yes, received the vaccine, the first dose, and would have caught the virus because the first dose was not protective enough. And one person would have had 2 doses, but they caught the virus before they received their second dose. So they're not fully protected because you needed 10 days after the second dose to be fully protected. And that was all that was taking place in Trinidad as part of a surge. But how they would take 341 persons who died from the virus and change it over, switch it over to say 341 persons died from receiving the vaccine confounds me. I consider that to be politics in its rawest form. And I denounce that. And I think that it's a shame.
So this was a clear case of doctoring?
This was a clear case. There are various forms of doctoring of videos. But anytime you go put up text, I don't know, Malcolm had come on and said when he saw the video, there was no text there. So how can you send out something that has text on it? That's clearly the first phase of it being doctored. And this is a shame. You can't go and say people died of a virus, people died of a vaccine, when in truth they died from the virus. And come on and want people to hold you as any credible type of entity, you know?
Okay, Malcolm, you want
Oh, well,
to
I mean,
this?
you know, I called in last week about that because I actually watched that event live and because it comes over Saturday and 2. So I generally try to avail myself of what's said to get an update. Because I am interested because I have lost a number of my transplant recipients to the virus. In fact, unfortunately, the fatality rate of my transplant recipients is 50%, and they're immune compromised. So I am well aware of the ramifications of vaccination and infection and death. So I was amazed when I tuned in on the Wednesday and heard JERROL and Mr. Thomas, you know, this having a heated discussion, should I say, about this. And when I heard the clip, I thought this is ridiculous. So I actually met Dr. Trotman the next day and I said, listen, I'm going to call in. And I told her what was happening. And I said, listen, I'm going to call into the program tomorrow and tell the public in St. Vincent that, you know, that's nonsense. So I did that. So I called on the Friday morning. I mean, it's just somebody trying to make mischief. But can I just say the other aspect of vaccine politics, what I think is in the broader sense of the word and term is that, for instance, one of the things that China has been doing is China has been using its influence and using vaccines to increase their influence in different countries throughout the world. And I think some of that is what has prodded, and in Russia as well, some of that has prodded Mr. Biden in the US when he realized, hold on, guys, look at what's happening here. So we need to come up, give you some vaccines, no strings attached, you know, so that at least they will retain their sphere of influence throughout the world. So that for me is where the vaccine politics comes in. What happened with Dr. Trotman and the clip is just bad-mindedness and nastiness. That's all I can say.
Okay, Malcolm, that was, yes, strong. Okay, somebody's asking, is Moderna WHO authorized? And second question for you, Dr. Thompson, it was reported that there are 2 reports of adverse reactions to the vaccine in SVG. Can you say which vaccine or vaccines are connected to these reports? I think
well, Moderna is approved.
It is approved. So
Moderna, yes.
Moderna is approved.
Yeah, WHO has, as far as I'm aware, and JERROL might be able to correct me, is Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Sinopharm, Johnson & Johnson.
Covishield, yeah. They've done it separately. The
Covishield is the AstraZeneca made in India, but India has a vaccine, yes, which I don't think which they made, that hasn't been approved. Sputnik hasn't been approved. The Sinovac hasn't been approved. The Cuban vaccines are actually still in phase 3 trials. So there's going to be quite a way to go for those in terms of approval.
Although I think that they have finished the phase 3 trials now. You know,
well, it hasn't. It hasn't been reported, as far as I'm aware.
Yes.
But I think they have at least 4 vaccines that they have been trialing in various stages of development. I know a couple are in phase 1 and phase 2. Yes. So there's another one called Novavax
that is finished. They also have
Yeah.
another single dose that they use, they're developing. But the main one, the Abdullah, which, you know, let me say, it does not always require WHO approval. In other words, for the 4 vaccines in China to be distributed, they don't need WHO. WHO wanted to approve certain vaccines if they are going to use them in the COVAX system. You understand? So if they're going to distribute them in COVAX, then they would do it. Unfortunately, the amount of vaccine that the COVAX could give you could only be about 20-25% of what you need. What we were promised was always just 20% of our population, you know, in terms of what we need. So that the different spheres of the world, you would realize that various countries make drugs, make vaccines, make other type of medication, and they are approved within their sphere. And the United States is never going to approve the Sputnik, is never going to achieve any of the Chinese vaccines. They don't need to. They already have vaccines there. And that's why they haven't approved even the AstraZeneca.
Important point.
You know,
We'll talk some more about that when we come back.
Yes,
We must take this
okay.
final break. Back in just a moment.
This evening on the VC3 News Update, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Simone Keezer-Beach has highlighted that there is no evidence of any COVID-19 variants in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Efforts to engage taxi drivers as it relates to vaccines and the COVID-19 protocols are ongoing. And the Organization of American States and the European Union make donation to the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force. Join us at 7 p.m. this evening for these stories and more on the VC3 News Updates.
Hello and hi.
Hello everyone, I am Shakel Bob. I am a former Miss Pitani, a former Miss Rural SDG and Miss LCD contestant and runner-up. I'm a lawyer by profession but a pageant lover at heart. Do not let the negatives prey on your mind because a stitch in time saves 9. So, it's COVID vaccination time. Get vaccinated today to reduce the impact of COVID-19 in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
And I urge you, get vaccinated. It is safe and it is effective. Stop the spread, help the fight, and make the choice that is right. And let us unite and do the thing right.
Welcome back. Before we took the break, you were making a critical point, but also wanted to answer that question that the person asked about what vaccines are associated with the reported.
Yes. We really have been just using one main vaccine, that's the AstraZeneca. I tell you the truth, we have not had any episodes of clotting, and around the world, you're not hearing much about clotting anymore. I think that there is an adverse effect related to clotting. I think that is clear, but it's rare. And with the Moderna and the Pfizer, there have also been some episodes of myocarditis. Again, very rare. As a matter of fact, do you know, persons who are smokers have more episodes of clotting. Persons who are on birth control pill have far more episodes of clotting. And the virus itself is notorious for causing clotting. So the episodes of clotting. Now, we also know now how to treat the clotting if it does and is related to the AstraZeneca. But the 2 cases we've had have not been serious cases. Matter of fact, there was one case we were investigating. Guess what? We thought this person was vomiting for 5 days. We found out it was dengue. The person had dengue. So it doesn't mean that because you've been vaccinated, you can't get run over by a car, or you can't pick up a sexually transmitted disease, or you can't, do something terrible and somebody knock you down or so. Other things could happen in your life, you know what I mean? Apart from being vaccinated, and sadly, some person may blame it on the vaccine, but not necessarily that it will be.
Someone is asking, is it true that for persons who hope to travel, should research the type of vaccine approved for the areas they intend to travel to?
This is always a good idea, but I think generally you're going to find it accepted. Throughout the Caribbean, Sputnik is accepted. AstraZeneca is not approved in the United States, but they will accept AstraZeneca in the United States, and they will also accept Sputnik in the United States. They haven't started to discriminate and say, you must have Pfizer or Moderna or Johnson because we make it here in the United States. They haven't come and said that. So that people in England and Europe who receive AstraZeneca are able to travel to the United States, but AstraZeneca is not approved in the United States. And also similarly, people from Argentina who receive Sputnik or from other countries Sputnik have been able to. I traveled to the United States and I have received the Sputnik. And I came back, I had no problems at all.
There you go.
Well,
someone is asking, Dr. Samuel, is COVID-19 a man-made disease?
No. Why would they ask me that? I wouldn't know that.
I don't know, the question was directed at Dr. Samuel, I don't know.
It's not a man-made disease at all.
Okay.
We are suffering from a man-made disease, which is called climate change. That I think is probably going to imperil us a little more, looking at the flooding in China and Germany and so on. So that is what I think is man-made and that we need to deal with. But yeah, I was just jumping into what JERROL was saying, is that, for instance, in Europe, which is governed by the European Medical Agency, they have expressed unwillingness to recognize the Covishield AstraZeneca as part, because in the European community, they have what is called this green passport. They have a passport which allows fully vaccinated individuals in one European country to travel to another one without any hassle. But as part of that, and for people who want to visit Europe, they are expressing some reluctance to accept the Covishield AstraZeneca, when in actual fact, it's the same formulation as the AstraZeneca, which is made in Holland and made in Britain. The US does not require anybody entering at present to be vaccinated. There is no demand, you don't have to be vaccinated. So hence the reason why, as JERROL says, they will accept. If you're vaccinated, that's fine. But there's no demand or specification as to what vaccine you need to get into the US.
Thanks for clarifying that, because there was another lie circulated about a certain individual who had in fact gone to the US and they were made to take another vaccine, which really doesn't make any sense. You spoke a lot about people falling ill or contracting the virus after the first dose of the vaccine. Impress upon the minds of people the importance of going back for that second dose.
Yes, this is so critical. It takes, I'm sure, a lot of effort for persons to go and get the first dose. But even after getting the first dose, I'm sure they're still reading, they're still hearing things. And so some persons may still be reluctant to go back for the second dose, especially if with the first dose you had a little pain or it made you tired or gave you a headache or so. Some people may think that that's serious side effect. That's not. Those are adverse effects that are normal. They affect about 1 or 2 in 10 persons. You may be unlucky to have it, but it tells us that the vaccine is working. The vaccine is really, really having an effect when you have those kind of reactions. A little fever for 24 hours, and after 24, 48 hours, it's gone away, and you wonder, well, what's the fuss? But some people think that, well, if they get the second dose, it might be worse. Usually the second dose is much milder and not have any effect than the first at all. And so I want to encourage persons, please go back, become fully vaccinated. Having 1 dose is better than natural immunity, than trying to put up on the virus yourself and say, well, come virus, give me natural immunity. But 1 dose is still not enough. And getting that second dose brings the effectiveness up to the 90 percentile. And I am hoping that what will also happen is that as the new variants threaten to come in case of Trinidad, they don't have the Delta, they have something called the Brazilian or P1, as we call it, the Gamma, that basically that will not come to save me, but the chances are it might. Or the Delta virus, if it's reached BVI, it will come here. And we're finding that the vaccines may be not as great, even though it may not be as 95% effective as we thought it would be. It may be 90, 85, 80%. So we want people to also make sure you wash your hands, you still wear your face mask, and your thing. People have asked, what's the point of vaccinating if I can't take off your mask? If I start to wash my hands? The vaccine, the immunity doesn't come through your hand and sterilize your hands. It doesn't act like a hand sanitizer. So if you continue shaking people's hands after vaccinated, you might still get the virus on your hands. So we want to encourage people to continue those things.
Somebody's asking, Dr. Thompson, what has been the experience with persons who got COVID after being fully vaccinated, and what was the impact of spread on immediate family members living in the same household?
Yes. So we must admit that we call breakthrough infection can occur because we're saying once again the vaccines are 90, 92, 93, 94% effective. That means that 4, 5, 6, 7% of people can still catch it even though vaccinated. But when they get it, they will only get the vaccine mild. Once again, I repeat, a little headache, a little runny nose, a little sore throat, and those are all the things we'll get. Now, 1 or 2 persons might still get it severe, but the chances of them still transmitting it can still occur. But the best thing, guess what? Have the other people in your household vaccinated too. Have the other people vaccinated too, because they may be the ones, instead of you spreading it to them, they may be the ones who will spread it to you. You may be still one of that 5% who could still get it. And there's some people whose immune system is still a little weak, a little immunocompromised. If you have kidney problems, if you are a transplant patient, if you are somebody who has some immunocompromise, even getting 2 doses still may not be fully get you up to scratch like you or me, And I think that's what was coming out, what Dr. Samuel was saying.
One of the things that we have observed, myself and some of my colleagues, is that a lot of patients with end-stage renal failure who are on dialysis have succumbed, including young, people in their 30s and 40s. So end-stage renal disease has a poor prognosis when people get COVID, and obviously in an immune-compromised state, a renal transplant patient does. Can I just also suggest or make an observation? And one of the things I observed on my journey in my taxi home today, in my authorized taxi today, was that people are not using their masks as they should in St. Vincent. And I can tell you for a fact that Trinidad has 90+% adherence to mask wearing. It's phenomenal. But I was disappointed in seeing a number of people, 4, 5, 6 people close together, sitting down, talking, and not masked, or the mask under their chin. So I think that's something that has to be emphasized, that masks will help to protect. The other thing is, and this is just an observation, which if the government of St. Vincent is trying to get people to vaccinate, what are you trying to tell an individual? If, for instance, you are then telling somebody who comes into the country who is fully vaccinated that they have to quarantine for 5, 7 days. So somebody will say, but if you're telling my cousin who is coming back from wherever that he has to vaccinate, so he's vaccinated, he's been vaccinated like 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and he has to go and spend money to stay in a hotel when he could come home by me and, I am fully vaccinated. Even if he's not fully vaccinated. What I'm saying is, if we are given a message that vaccination is good and is desirable, then I think there should be some way of saying, well, fine, if you're coming in fully vaccinated, negative PCR, we do your PCR and it's good, you're good to go. Trinidad, for example, has reopened, and once you're fully vaccinated, national or non-national, and you come with a negative PCR, you're good to go. So if we're not treating those people who are vaccinated in a certain way, then it's difficult to convince somebody who's unvaccinated, well, then why should I bother? I could just stay in my little corner here and,
And I think that's the perfect note on which to end this evening's edition of Roundtable Talk. We are out of time, and as usual, I want to say a special thank you to Doctors Samuel and Thompson for being our special guests on this evening's edition of Roundtable Talk. Thank you, and we'll see you again next week, same time, same place. Good evening.